Hello, I'm JW. This is a continuation of a series on the wiring regulations, BS7671, and in this episode we're going to have a look at part 6 and basically have a look at the changes between the existing 17th edition Amendment 3 and the new 18th edition, which is applicable from January 2019. So let's have a look in part 6. And previously this consisted of 3 chapters, which were 61, 62 and 63, and this is the one that covered testing and inspection and so on. So let's just see what the changes are this time. So as you can see here, chapters 61, 62 and 63 are not used, so they've all completely gone away. So that's pretty much it then, and until next time, thanks for watching. But just a minute, let's have a look over the next page, and well, see in here we've got a new chapter 64, and there's actually chapter 65 as well. Now what's actually happened here is that the original chapters, as we see at the top here, 1, 2 and 3 are not used. Chapter 61 used to be initial verification, that is now chapter 64. Chapter 62 used to be periodic inspection and testing, which as you can see here is now chapter 65. Chapter 63 used to be certification for the 2 items, and essentially all they've done is cut up chapter 63 in half, stick half of it on the end of chapter 64, and then the other half has been stuck on the end of chapter 65. So in theory most of the content's the same, it's just been removed, cut up and then stuck in a different place. And of course this means that every single regulation number has changed, as they all now start with 64 or 65. Now as well as that, there are a number of changes to some of the regulations themselves, so let's start on page 64 here, or chapter 64. Now, unfortunately in this chapter, because all the numbers have changed, the line is solid all the way through, but in reality most of it hasn't actually changed. The first real change here is 6423, this is a section on inspection, and the first change here is to item 3. Now this now says routing of cables in prescribed zones and so on. Previously it said safe zones, so essentially safe zones are now prescribed zones. Other than that, nothing else has really changed there. Now, same regulation number continuing over the page, and we have section 8, and this is actually part C, and then within that we have number 4 here, and then within that we have an additional item, which is the exposed conductive parts are connected to the earthing arrangement. So for inspection purposes, that's just another item which needs to be confirmed. Pretty obvious that most people would have confirmed that anyway, but now it is listed as a specific separate item. And further down, the exact same regulation number, so we're still in 6423, we have this item here which has been added. So selection and installation of suitable surge protective devices where required. And finally another new one at the end here, measured against electromagnetic disturbances. So a couple of extra items there added on for the inspection part of it, and this is within the initial verification chapter, which is now 64. Now moving on to the testing section of that, so we've got one here which is 6432. Now this has been reworded somewhat, and the one that immediately followed this was the continuity of ring final circuit conductors. That has actually been removed, and then it's sort of been incorporated into this. So the whole thing now is that the continuity of conductors and connections to exposed conductive parts and extraneous conductive parts, if any, shall be verified by measurement of the resistance on, first of all, the protective conductors, including protective bonding conductors, and in the case of ring final circuits, live conductors. So it basically says exactly what it said before, except instead of saying circuit protective conductors and things, it's now connections to these items, which is essentially the same thing. And of course protective conductors listed here, bonding conductors, and in the case of ring final circuits, live conductors. Now live of course covering line and neutral, and of course in the ring final circuit the protective conductor is also covered because of the ones previously. So a bit of sort of condensing down into the same item there. Another thing that's been removed are the requirements for the test voltage and current, as previously that was 200 milliamps minimum and open circuit voltage of between 4 and 24 volts. So that has been completely removed. So not entirely clear why that's gone, and whether it may be the case that the standard for test equipment may now contain that isn't clear, but nevertheless that has been deleted. But other than that, the actual continuity test is pretty much the same as it always was. It's just been reworded in a rather more compact form. Now for installation resistance, this is pretty much the same here. No real changes, and the table 64 with the actual voltages and minimum resistances are the same as before. The changes here are to FELV circuit, or functional extra low voltage. Most of this is actually the same, it's just that what was previously a note has been put back into the main body of the text. And it's this one here about FELV circuit should be tested at the same test voltage. It now actually says the same voltage as applied to the primary side of the source and meets all the test requirements for low voltage circuit. So the primary side of the source bit is new, meeting all the test requirements for low voltage circuits, the same as it always was. And of course that refers to the table above in terms of what test voltage you're using and the minimum installation resistance. And an extra piece here that's been added is the when measured values show evident differences between circuits, further investigation to identify the reasons is required. New bit of text, but again, I think anyone who's done any kind of testing before, if you had a whole pile of circuits in a new installation, if you're going to measure all of them and one of them comes out with massively different readings, then common sense would suggest that there's something obviously wrong with it. But been added in as a extra bit of wording there. Now the next bit is polarity, but before we do that, the one piece here has actually been removed, which was 61245, and that's in the numbering in the old edition. That basically covered basic protection by a barrier or enclosure provided during erection. That has actually now been deleted, so it's no longer an item here for inspection on initial verification. Now the change to polarity is the first part here, so where relevant, the polarity of the supply at the origin of the installation shall be verified before the installation is energised. So this is going to be your incoming supply to the building. Checking the polarity of that is now a thing, and again obviously before the installation is energised, because if it was incorrect then you could end up with incorrect polarity throughout the entire installation. And although we're talking about AC, of course polarity means is the line and neutral conductors in the correct places, because if they're swapped around you can end up with switches in the neutral only, and there's other problems. And there's a couple of other minor changes here. This part here, where single pole switching devices are not permitted in the neutral conductor, a test were made to make sure that they're all disconnected in the line conductor only. Again, that's sort of been added in there. This part is substantially the same. The only difference here is that at the end it now says wiring has been correctly connected throughout the installation. Previously it just said wiring is correctly connected to socket outlets and accessories. Now it's throughout the entire installation, which kind of amounts to the same thing. Now for 64371, which is general, it's split up into the various types of systems, so TN system first and the others following. There are a few minor changes here. And again, this is the initial verification of an installation, not something you're going to test after it's been installed and in service for a while. The only addition here is this note which says see table 3A in appendix 3, and again we'll be seeing that when we get to the appendix video. And that very same note has actually been added in further down as well for the TT system. So again, there's the very same note added in. Basically it contains trip times for various types of RCDs. Another new item is this paragraph here, so where the effectiveness of the protective measure has been confirmed at a point located downstream of an RCD, the protection of the installation downstream from this point may be proved by confirmation of the continuity of the protective conductors. And again, that's actually repeated for the TT system underneath as well. On B number 2 here, a small additional wording here, we have other appropriate methods has been added, so if for example short time or instantaneous tripping setting for circuit breakers and so on. And again that applies to both TN and TT systems. And the final part here is section C for the IT system. This content is substantially the same, but it has actually been expanded with quite a bit more detail, but the actual basic inspection and procedures, whatever, are actually the same. I'd say a bit more detail involved there. And also bearing in mind that IT systems are fairly uncommon, as they're where that's the way they've got your system is not connected to the general mass of Earth. It's either not connected at all or it's connected through a large impedance, so it's a fairly unusual arrangement, but there is quite a bit more detail there and has been added in compared to previously. So now I've got 64373, so earth fault loop impedance, and this again refers to testing initial verification. This part here and here are new, so now I've got an electrical continuity test to be carried out according to regulation 6432 before carrying out the earth fault loop impedance measurement. The measured earth fault loop impedance shall comply with Chapter 41, and then where the requirements of this regulation are not satisfied and supplementary protective equipotential bonding according to Chapter 41 is provided, the effectiveness of that bonding shall be verified. So those 3 items are new or have been added in there. Now we've also got this note here regarding further information on measurement of this can be found in Appendix 3, and that also is a new part which we'll look at a later time. Now 6438, which is additional protection, which is RCDs essentially. The note here has been added, so effectiveness is deemed to have been verified where an RCD meeting the requirements of Regulation 41511 disconnects within 40 milliseconds when tested at current equal to or higher than 5 times its rated residual operating current. So this is again pretty much a standard type of thing here. 40 milliseconds being the maximum disconnection time when the RCD is tested at 5x or 5 times the current. So for a 30 milliamp one, that'll be the 150 milliamp test. That again is a standard test done on RCDs. Existing test equipment already does that, and the time is already 40 milliseconds anyway. So again, nothing really changed there. It's just put a note in to clarify that point. Check of phase sequence. A new bit here. It's now for polyphase circuits. It shall be verified that the phase sequences maintained at all relevant points throughout the installation. And the added part there is the maintained at all relevant points throughout the installation. Previously it just said verify that phase sequences maintained. So now it's just the entire installation. But again, anybody with any kind of basic sense would of course check at all of the relevant points, because obviously just checking at one point in a huge factory or something is not going to be satisfactory to confirm that it's all been wired up correctly. 64310, functional testing, and there's a couple of additions here. Got some list of specific examples of equipment, whereas previously it was just a general sentence. So we've now got switchgear and control gear assemblies, drives, controls and interlocks, systems for emergency switching off and emergency stopping, and installation monitoring. And then note, this list is not exhaustive, so there's a whole pile of other stuff which would need to be checked and tested as well. And that's pretty much what it always was. It's just they've kind of called out a certain arrangement of stuff there to specifically identify. And then we've got a piece here about when AFDD or arc fault detection device is installed, the effectiveness of any manually operated test facility should be verified in accordance with the manufacturer's recommendations. And that's basically pressing the test button on the front of such a device. From what I've seen so far, there is no test machine or piece of equipment to test AFDDs. The only test involved is literally the test button on the front of the thing, and that's assuming of course you fitted these things in the first place. Now, verification of voltage drop 64311. This existed before, but it was quite lengthy in wording. Now all we've got is this single sentence, so where required to verify compliance with Chapter 52, the voltage drop shall be evaluated by measurement or calculation. And as it says on the next page, the verification of voltage drop is not normally required during initial verification, primarily because it should have been done at the design stage, and also that's to make sure that cables are of suitable size and not excessively long. So again, not really much to say there. It's just something that could theoretically be done, but in reality that's not going to be something that's checked or done when the system is installed. Because bearing in mind, if it had been done in such a way that the voltage drop was excessive and then you'd installed it and that was the first time you'd found out, well, it's kind of too late because you've already installed it. The only way to fix those sort of problems is to basically rip out all the cabling and install the proper size or install the circuits in a different way. So basically it's the design stage only, pretty much never done on the initial verification. Now 644, which is most of this page, which is the certification for initial verification. This is essentially what used to be in the separate chapter, which was chapter 63, and now it's just been sort of shoehorned on the back of the first chapter here. It has been expanded and sort of rearranged and sort of rewritten a bit in various ways, but most of the content, again, it's pretty much the same kind of stuff. No real major changes there, but to say it's in a bit of a different order. Some of the bits have been sort of rearranged and put around slightly differently. Now, chapter 65, which is periodic inspection and testing. There are a few minor changes here. There's not really a whole lot. This is a very short chapter anyhow. It's basically this page and a tiny bit on the top of the next one. And as with the other one, this has what used to be in the chapter on this, and then the part about reporting has been tacked on the end, sort of combined with it. So a couple of new items here, 6512, and the first new item is the number 3 here. So it's confirmation of the correct rating and setting of protected devices required by Chapter 41, and then also the following one, confirmation of correct rating and setting of monitoring devices. So this could be things like RCMs and other items there. So just a couple of items added in there. So note 2 here, has also been added new, so existing installations may have been designed and installed to conform to previous editions of BS7671 applicable at the time of their design and erection. This does not necessarily mean that they are unsafe. Now again, this isn't actually a new concept, because if you're going to do a periodic inspection, then clearly it's fairly likely that the installation was not designed to the regulations in force today. But some people presumably have been going around saying, well, because you've got a plastic consumer unit in your house and it was installed only 2 years ago, well, clearly it's a pile of unsafe rubbish and has to be ripped out and replaced with the latest deal. Not true at all, and never was. So this is kind of sort of clarifying that point. And of course the deal is that with most older installations, provided they're still safe, then there's no real need to go updating them and replacing stuff just because some regulation has changed that says now, say, consumer units must be made of steel instead of some plastic material, or some other minor things changed, such as the, say, in the 1970s, green sleeving was used for protective conductors, and of course now it no longer is allowed. But that doesn't mean you have to change it all, it's just the fact that it's no longer compliant with the regulations. There's a huge difference between non-compliant and dangerous. The final bit of text that's been added here is this one here, which is where a circuit is permanently monitored by an RCM or IMD, which is a residual current monitor or installation monitoring device. It's not necessary to measure the installation resistance if the functioning of these devices is correct, because essentially that's what those things are doing. They're actually monitoring the installation resistance continuously. So if you've actually got one of those and it's working correctly, there's no point or in fact need to start checking the installation resistance, because those devices are basically doing that all the time. But of course you do need to make sure that the functioning of the RCM or IMD is verified, because obviously if it's not working, then who knows what state the installation could be in. 6532, got a specific list of items which should be included on the actual report, so details of those parts of the installation that have been inspected and tested, any limitations of the inspection and testing, any damage, deterioration, defects or dangerous conditions, any non-compliance with the requirements of BS7671 which may give rise to danger. And again, the point here is the ones which give rise to danger. You don't necessarily have to put down the fact that a piece of sleeving and a light fitting was solid green because it was installed 40 years ago. No one really cares about that and it doesn't change anything. But obviously if there's something which left rise to danger, because say it was the front cover fell off or the socket smashed in or something, obviously that should be written down. And again, this is not new or some kind of magic adjustment. It's just it's been specifically written down here, as no doubt there were some people in the past who decided to write down every minor insignificant item, even though no one actually cared. And continuing that list, schedules inspection as appropriate to those detailed in section 642, and of course the test results as in section 643. Now the very last item here is 6534. The report, and that's the electrical installation and condition report, shall include a recommended interval until the next inspection. Nothing new in that, that's where you put down next inspection in 5 years or 10 years or whatever. But what is new is supported by an explanation for the recommendation. So in other words, if you're going to put down, say, next inspection in 3 years, you then need to put down because of some reason or reasons, not just, oh, inspect it next 20 years and couldn't be bothered to explain why. So a bit of extra text required there, but again it's not going to be particularly difficult to do that. It's just a question of writing a few more words of explanation. So that's part 6, inspection and testing, and in reality there's not really a whole lot of change here. A few minor items to do with what you're going to be writing down, looking at and so on, but certainly in the terms of the testing procedures they're the same as they were in the 17th edition. And you don't have to go and buy any new test equipment, because the test equipment you have for the 17th edition is going to do the job just as well, because it's exactly the same. Now I'm sure there's going to be some dodgy manufacturers come out and say, oh, here's your 18th edition test equipment and all the rest of it. But of course a load of nonsense, because the tests are exactly the same, nothing has changed. You most certainly do not have to go and buy a whole load of stuff, just for the fact that it's not the 18th edition one, or what you have doesn't say anything on it. So that's perfectly fine. So beware of certain vendors selling things which are misdescribed. You don't have to actually buy any of that unless you particularly want to. So that's it for this time. Next time we'll have a look at part 7, of course. But until then, thanks for watching.